Salamun alaikum. Today, inshallah, we're going to discuss a very important question, which is: did Allah order Al Khidr to kill a young boy? It's a very contentious question. It's a very difficult question to answer, according to some. And many scholars have struggled with this simple, really direct, and should be obvious question, as you shall see. I promise you, by the end of this session, inshallah, you will watch very diligently and carefully, and you're going to see for yourself that this question is so obvious to answer directly from the Quran, without any convoluted answer, without any gymnastics, without any games. And we're going to start right away, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the basis for all stories in the Quran. All stories in the Quran are based on this one paragraph from Surah Al-Haqqah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولو تقول علينا بعض الأقاويل لأخذنا منه باليمين ثم لقطعنا منه الوتين فما منكم من أحد عنه حاجزين. The verses are discussing exactly the rules that are imposed upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with regards to all stories, all declarations, all explanations given in the Quran, not necessarily about the instructions, the sharia, the halal and haram. Halal and haram and sharia and rulings that are legislative in nature. Prophet, as a prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given a free hand in determining how they are exactly to be implemented. But the content of the Quran, otherwise, other than the legislative decrees, they were restricted and purely restricted from any additions. And this is a general rule. The verses say, had he, meaning Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, added any declaration on top, alayna, on top of us, on top of what we've given, alayna, had he added any declaration on top of our declarations. For example, the stories are declarations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared that this is the situation, this is the story, these are the details of what happened. Then we would have punished him, and then we would have severed his life vein, and then none of you would have been a shield protecting him, would have offered to protect him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this general rule to tell us that any information you hear from people claiming that they know more about the stories, they know more information, more details than what the Quran provided us itself from within the Quran, it could not have come from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam understood this verse very well. All right, so we're talking about Al Khidr. Al Khidr is a name given by some people. The brief, quick introduction to this subject, because the time is limited. I apologize for going through this very fast. This name was never mentioned in the Quran. It was mentioned in a tangential manner in one of the hadith, but this hadith is questionable for the reason I just gave you in here. It could not be that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have added anything to a story given in the Quran. And this story about Musa and Al-Khidr, which is in Surah Al-Kahf, Surah number 18, and we're going to see a few verses from it, tells the story of the interactions between Musa and this person. Now, what is the conclusion? This person, or Al-Khidr, the name Al-Khidr, of course this person did exist in the story, but his name is not Al-Khidr, has nothing to do with all the legend and the fables and the fictions that have been weaved around such character. So basically it's been used as a false basis of mythical claims by so many different sects, by Sufi orders, by secret societies, and so on. And then some went on to falsely claim, to create a lie, that this person, Al-Khidr, even taught Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and that he is still alive, and that some people, charlatans, in my opinion, still receive orders from him and instructions from him and knowledge from him. And all sorts of mythology has been weaved falsely and wrongly defiling the content of what the Quran says about him. All right, so that's enough of an introduction. In Surah Al-Kahf, number 65, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces this person. Again, his name is not Al-Khidr, so I'm going to call him a knowledgeable man. This is literally how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces him. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. A wayfarer or a servant of Allah, a man among our wayfarers, upon whom we have bestowed mercy from us and whom we had taught directly some special knowledge. And we're going to see a little bit what that means. It doesn't really mean that he was given access to everything. He was given some knowledge. Min ladunna, some knowledge from our side. So the story continues in verse 74. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when they فانطلقا حتى إذا لقيا غلاما فقتله قال أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا. And so they went on until they found a young man. There's two people, a pair of people who went on, and they were searching for a young man. They found him, لقيا, as if they had a meeting with him, and then he killed him. Of course, we don't know exactly yet. The rest of the story will tell us. And then he said, again, we don't know who this he is, but the rest of the story will tell us. You killed a person with a potentially purified self. Nafsan zakiyya. Zakiyya ism fa'il, an active participle. That means has the potential to do this, to become zaki or purified. Without due cause. بغير نفس. In this case, it was a young boy. It was a young man, literally a young man. Not necessarily a young boy, because the word ghulam does not mean a young boy. The Quran uses it in many different instances to mean a young man in general. So it was without due cause, this person said, you have committed a repugnant act. And now, at the end of the same story, verse 80, the second person is explaining what he did. And thus he says, according to the Quran, this is the murderer, the person who killed, right? Is responding to the other person who accused him or sort of blamed him for this murder. وأما الغلام فكان أبواه مؤمنين فخشينا أن يرهقهما طغيانا وكفرا. As for the young man, his parents were believers, and we feared that he would make them suffer much through rebellion and disbelief. Now, I want to stop here and let you know that I surveyed every single tafsir that I could get my hands on, 28 in total. Every single one of them agreed that we feared referred to, astaghfirullah, this knowledgeable man plus Allah. Two people, two characters or two subjects included in the verb feared, including Allah. And they all worked very hard and did all sorts of convoluted arguments to try to explain why the word or the verb feared was used in association with Allah. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Never mind, let's continue. And we feared that he would make them suffer through rebellion and disbelief. So we desired, again, we in here, according to all the books of tafsir, are related to this knowledgeable man plus Allah, as if Allah ordered this knowledgeable man. Again, I'm not calling him Khidr because there's absolutely no evidence that that's his name. So we desired that their Lord give them instead of him one who is better in purity and nearer in mercy. Now, these verses violate, according to their interpretation, according to the tafsir, the tradition, the so-called tradition, violates their tafsir, violates all sorts of problems, creates all sorts of problems and violate all sorts of rules. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not punish a person unless he actually acts. So this violates this first rule. The second problem is that the word feared is used in association with Allah. The third rule is that they allocated or they assigned or they attributed this act to Allah, and they ignore the fact that if Allah had wanted to do so, Number one, he would have done it by himself through sickness, through an accident, through whatever you want, without telling anyone. Why did he include Al-Khidr? Why is there such an important lesson to learn from this? Of course, nobody explained, nobody provided the answer to all of these questions and all of these problems. They use this last part, which is verse 82, وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي. So this is the same person, the knowledgeable man, the knowledgeable servant of Allah, the wayfarer, who is explaining to Musa, supposedly, why he did this. And he is supposed to have said, وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي. And of course, this is the very last verse in the story. And they said, well, none of what he did was of his own decision. Now, you're going to see how beautiful and simple and straightforward the explanation of all of these things are. It just strikes you in the face, and you're going to ask yourself, how come nobody saw this? Now, let's go back to the verse where the explanation of the assassination was given. This is verse 80, and I want you to pay attention. وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامِ, as for the young man, his parents were believers. And we feared. Now, if I ask you, if I'm writing simple statement, and I say, we, after I mentioned the two parents, wouldn't you automatically associate the two parents in the subject for feared? And the answer, of course, yes. And yet nobody saw this. So we feared, meaning the knowledgeable man plus his two parents. Now think about this. His two parents were in on this assassination. Why? Because it's explaining. They were afraid, we were afraid, including the person who killed him, that this young man would cause all sorts of suffering through rebellion and disbelief. It's very simple. And now you ask, wow, the parents participated in the murder of their own son? Of course, this happens every day. As a matter of fact, if you go to modern history in China right now, today, in the last 10 years, 20 years, in the last 50 years, with their policy of a single child, many parents would murder their own young daughters, right? Firstborn, if the firstborn is a girl and they did not want a girl, they would murder that young baby daughter because they wanted a boy. And that happens all the time. So if they were afraid that this person, this young man, would create problems, and again, remember, he's not a young boy, he's not a baby, he's a young man. Ghulam means young man, right? They already saw from him some rebellion, some problems. He was probably participating in the life of the gangs that Pharaoh and his legions encouraged to fragment the Israelite community where Musa lived. And therefore, now you see a hint of what's going on. This is happening during the early life of Musa. And the person he was affiliated with, which was a gang member, was also connected with the community of believers, and they were purifying the community from any potential problems among them. For example, possibly a spy working on behalf of Pharaoh. It could be a million explanations why the parents would want to get rid of this young man. The point is, linguistically, it is so obvious, it's staring us in the face. The parents are mentioned right there, and the person who is speaking is including himself in the subject in the sense of a plural. So khashina, plural, we feared, meaning I, the second person who is speaking, the murderer, plus the parents. It's very obvious. And then it continues in the next verse. فَأَرَدْنَا أَن يُبْدِلَهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا خَيْرًا مِّنْهُ. Now, of course, aradna has the subject, the same subject, which is we wanted, we desired that their Lord. Now, if their Lord was included in aradna, right, it wouldn't have been included as a separate word in the sentence. In other words, it wouldn't have said we desired that their Lord. So it could have simply stated, so we desired to give them, instead of him, one who is better in purity and nearer in mercy. But the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran included their Lord as a separate term clearly indicate that their Lord is not part of we. So, in other words, we desired includes the person who did the murder plus the two parents. That's we, plural. So, these two sentences, these two verses of the Quran, are not referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah would not do this. Allah, if He wanted to do this, He would do it in so many different ways without having to justify it to anyone. So as you see, the explanation is very simple. It's staring us in the face, and yet, for some reason, the books of tafsir refused to see the obvious truth that's staring them in the face. I don't know why nobody has seen this before, but I assure you, because of the methodology that we use, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes He opens up the hearts to see the truth, and sometimes He locks up the hearts so you cannot see it, even if it's staring you in the face. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the wisdom and the certainty of belief and the confidence to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His words and His scripture. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you the patience to continue listening and learning and watching. And I thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.